So there we go. So we're actually recording. So brief overview again. We have Xin B1 into Renekton, which is terrible, and this will grief the game for them. Ziggs is great. Ezreal's a good counter to it though, because he can still kind of farm even with the siege. This allows them to have kind of like a roaming support like the Leona or the Braum. They should have taken Lucian here, I think, instead of the Syndra. Although actually no, this was actually good because they've already gone Renekton, which means now this Renekton is forced into top lane. So later on into the draft now they can just pick their top and it's not blind. So it's actually pretty good. So I just think this is pretty good. So they picked the Lee Sin in response. Obviously Xin ganks, Lee ganks, they just don't go near each other and they just win like that. So right here, okay, I was gonna literally say Rise. The Rise is really good because into Syndra, you know, it will get pressured early, but then it will just permafarm later on. And again, they do really enjoy in China, on this patch especially, running the Ziggs and the Rise. They did this in the last game. They did this in Fun Plus Phoenix EDG also really favor this duo too. So this duo is a very, very popular duo in China. So the only thing is, and I said this previously, I've said this multiple times, you can't go double AP mid and bot lane if your top laner isn't performing well. And we've seen this from Ale, that lately he just hasn't been playing well. Even when he isn't on the Renekton and he's on the Viego, he plays bad. Now, he did have one pop-off game 2 of this series, where he really did smurf it on the Jax, but he got hard counter to do that, and they've just inted him again with the Renekton. Now, they did do this in game 2, though, and then in R5, they countered top lane. But, like I previously mentioned, we have this Braum with the Ezreal. Very, very good in terms of overall game state, because Ezreal can proc Braum's passive with his Qs too, so we can get 2 instantly, which is very good. Auto Q, auto, and Braum, if he gets one more auto off as well, it's just very, very easy to proc that Braum passive. On top of that, the Lee Sin and the Renekton want to both come into this team, and they both want to jump on them. And the Braum just kind of denies that. Like, his ultimate just means that you can't really engage on him ever. So that's really, really good. Now, they are hovering the Mundo. I think Mundo, okay, is very good. Purely for the fact that it's a big, beefy tank top. It's great. Now, we want to see, so they did actually pick the Trundle. Again, Trundle is just a good counter to tanky supports, because if they try and jump in and do anything, say Braum wants a W to a minion to Q, well, what Trundle can do is he can instantly ult, use his W to get that movement speed with the slow from his E and just fully engage on any of them. He can actually fully engage on Ezreal if he mispositions and kill him. But the only issue I see with this game now, and the reason why I think that RNG are kind of inting, is because they've chosen this Mundo, which is a good pick, but it's not good in this situation. Because, I mean, it's into a Renekton, that's completely fine, but you already have an Ezreal bot lane. So now you're in a situation that you're the only real lane that this Xin Zhao can play through, because he can't really take an easy 1v1 with the Lee Sin, because Lee Sin is a very good 1v1 champ. So the only lane this Xin can really play through now is going to be mid lane, which is okay. The Syndra does have a stun to set him up, but I just think not having a side lane that you can focus heavily is really bad, and this Lee Sin's going to focus this Renekton very heavily in this game, and that's going to allow him to potentially get ahead due to the fact that he doesn't really need to go bot lane. Trundle has a ridiculous amount of sustain, and Ziggs can poke out quite easily, so as long as bot lane don't really walk into a position where they can get caught, then they're very, very, they're in a really good spot. Now, we do have this problem though on RNG of, I really don't think they can win with this comp, because they just have nowhere to put their eggs. Like, obviously, you don't want to be putting all of your eggs in one basket, and this is what Xin Zhao needs to do now, because it's a Syndra mid. So it's going to be very, very hard for them to actually win this game. They can still win this game, obviously, if Syndra gets ahead and Xin Zhao gets a good early game, but their scaling isn't as good either. They've got a Rise and a Ziggs, which means they're going to have almost instant wave clear into basically Syndra on her own. And I just think it's going to be very, very hard for RNG to win this game now. And it's all because they decided to go with this Mundo top into the Renekton, which a bit confusing. This is why I was very heavily saying that they should have looked to take Lucian on B3, purely because they could still flex it, and it saves it getting banned in the next rotation. So even though Syndra might get banned, you know, Alexi crying on something else. What did he play in game 1? So in game 1 he played Lissandra because he was into a LeBlanc, and then he just played Syndra in both other games. So I guess it's somewhat comfort pick for him, but overall, Shanghai China looks so nice. So anybody wanna sponsor a China trip? Me neither, but right. So early game, Xin Zhao pathing, he's just pathing to Master Lee Sin. In this game, I don't actually, I'm not a big fan of the way that the Lee Sin is actually pathing here, because unless he's looking to split the map, which he can't do because bot lane are already showing, like unless he's looking to split the map, then I don't think he should start red, and he can't split the map because Zin's on blue right here. So I think if he knows that Zin's going to start blue, he should just go blue, Gromp, red, top gank. Like, obviously they don't really have CC for Mundo, and it's going to be a little bit harder to kill him, but I don't really see the point in playing around a Ziggs Trundle lane, especially when they've got Ezreal and Braum to disengage. Now, one of the reasons why this is bad as well is because if Ezreal uses his E to escape, Braum can then use his W to just jump on top of Ezreal. So in theory, whenever Ezreal wants to escape, as long as Braum is paying attention, he can also escape. Now, as you see here, these procs on the Trundle, they are from the Braum's passive and the Ezreal Q. So this is why this lane is kind of good as well. Obviously, you have some lanes that the champion will be good later on into the game, like for example Ezreal Lulu, which, you know, Lulu doesn't really give Ezreal the things that he needs, but she will be good for the comp later on. So it's usually a lane you avoid because it's going to end up with a really bad bot lane, but Braum still manages to do what he needs to, even though he's playing with this Ezreal in lane. So as you can see here though, the Rise, it's going to cost him a lot of mana, but he can just keep forcing waves in over and over and over. You can't cheat a recall into a Syndra either because a wave clear is too big. You'll never actually manage to get that freeze off on the bounce. So Rise can't really reset just out of nowhere. He does have Corrupting Pot though. Syndra gets a nice poke on him, and she's actually conserved her mana much more. So now the Rise is actually in a very, very heavily gankable position with no mana whatsoever. So I want to see this Lee Sin come, the Xin come. But the Lee Sin has gone and hovered into the jungle. Now, Zin's pathing has been very, very kind of predictable in all of these games. And there's been some situations where they've been the right play, but he's also just not really... He's going more for a farm playstyle on Xin Zhao, which just doesn't really work. Like, you want that early game pressure, that kind of cheese potential, even in pro play, of just kind of getting 3 camps, get 3, and then try and get pressure in lanes. Especially when you've got, for example, kind of like a Renekton top, which is going to, you know, have quite a lot of pressure. Okay, so he might actually catch here. So, yep, nice. Okay, so he kills Icon here. Oh, he didn't use his W. Okay, now he uses it. He uses his W so late. Now, he does still manage to get the first blood, but that's so risky, especially when he's used his sweeper in that brush, and he knows that he doesn't know he's there. Now, it can be hard to predict these players' movements, especially considering they have, like, no ping. But overall, like, you still need to be able to go for that play in order to save what might happen. Now, another really big issue, though, that I'm also seeing here is, look at this wave state in mid lane. Now, the Xin Zhao has more than enough HP to just come and fix this wave state. Now Syndra has to use TP to TP into the lane and crash this wave, otherwise she's doomed. And the Rise is just going to TP back instantly, and it's just over for her. So Rise TP's back here now, and he actually gets a freeze in this lane if he plays it properly. The observers aren't actually looking over it right now. But now Syndra is forced to TP when she could have had that wave crashed in by Xin, which would have gave Xin solo XP as well, because Syndra 100% needed to back, don't get me wrong, but she could have saved that TP so that she didn't need to use it to get back to lane. So again, very, very poor TP play from RNG. So very poor TP play when it comes to kind of wave states in general, especially in comp. In solo queue it's not as bad because it's like in solo queue you want to get in lane and you want to have as much pressure, and you know you can potentially pin them on the tower and go for an objective from that. But there was no objective to actually get that priority for, so she could have potentially left herself in a situation where you know, the Rise would have been punished again. Now, again, this wave is so far pushed up due to the fact that Xin Zhao didn't crash it previously, so it's kind of worrying because Wei has already showed very kind of weak points in his gameplay. Even though he has had some good games and he has had some pop-offs, like, it feels like he's he hasn't played the champion a large amount, which I might be wrong, but again, it feels like he hasn't really played that champion too much. But this comes into Xiaohu. So the Xin does have a kill. Again, like I previously mentioned, the only real lane Xin can play through here is this mid lane. So the fact that he is actually getting stuff off there is good. I don't think it's going to be enough to win. Ming coming in with a rotation. Ezreal used his TP bot, which, again, we didn't get to see the lane state of that bot lane, so we don't know if that TP was good or not. I mean, when you take TP on Ezreal, it's usually because other summoners aren't going to be as useful for you. So you just use TP to keep pressure and just play around that and get kind of eco resets. So, like, he just resets to fill his mana bar up, get a tier, a longsword, whatever it is, and then come back. So now this is really bad. So this is like almost tilting to see, because right now we can see that LNG don't have any vision here and don't have any vision here because we've got control wards, and we also know that they're not there. So by having vision in this area, we know that they're not in this area, right? So we know they're in this top side. So if they go for the crab, if they go for these camps, no matter what, RNG shouldn't be looking to fight this, especially considering the Ezreal is still bot lane and the Mundo is top with a fairly good wave that's going to turn into a slow push. Now the reason why this is really bad is because RNG have the opportunity to completely end the game here, because what they look to do is, instead of look to fight this, they've got control wards here, they just instantly come down and get the dragon, considering this Ziggs is pinned on the tower. Now the reason why this is important as well is because they managed to get this dragon. With that, this Mundo is getting a really big slow push here. So then what happens is, as soon as they get this dragon, Xin Zhao resets, walks top, and then uses his slow push to potentially dive, because Mundo at 6 can kind of keep his HP up for a long period of time. They can dive, get the kill on the tower. That can then translate into them going for the Herald, and then from this Herald then come up, finish off this tower with Herald, and now all of a sudden they have this huge gold lead. Now that would mean that the Mundo has a massive gold lead, but that's not too bad because the Renekton's going to fall off anyway, and Mundo's damage later into the game is actually okay. So it's not really this whole play and this whole fight is one of the reasons why China will potentially struggle against better teams, especially Korean teams that know how to trade. Because right here they're going for this fight. Okay, I mean, the TP comes in super late and it's always going to go wrong. They're at a numbers disadvantage. Now it's easy enough to say that in hindsight, but as pro players they should be able to understand this. So they just don't really have anywhere near enough prio on objectives. So I mean, this was very, very sad to see, like, to be honest, because they were set up for a perfect kind of series of events that would have been very low variance and very easy to execute. And now what happens is this Renekton just manages to defuse this top wave, and now all of a sudden Mundo gets absolutely nothing, and he'll basically get frozen against and completely kind of screwed this game. So now this Renekton is gonna end up being somewhat useful because RNG is just playing it all wrong. Like, I think they're very, very nervous. They know that they need to win this game, otherwise they're out. And I think maybe they somewhat know that there's a little bit of a draft differential, but we shall see. So they gift blue over to Syndra, that's normal. Syndra now has the ability that, since Ryze doesn't also have a blue, and because he's rushed those Merc Treads, that, you know, it's going to be painful. Now, Merc Treads rush usually aren't too great, but when you're playing into a Syndra Xin lane, and the kind of game is in this state where the only real lane that Xin has to play through is mid, all of a sudden you prioritize things that will keep you alive and just stop you griefing. So the Merc Treads mean that even if you get hit by the Syndra stun, it's going to be slightly reduced, so you can potentially get away before Xin Zhao manages to get his W on you. So if Xin gets that W, then you just die. So I actually just spilled water all over myself. Yep, coach, by the way. Can't even put a water bottle to my face properly. Either way, I think this game is a little bit doomed, like, to be completely honest. because Ziggs and Rise are just getting the opportunity to scale. It was a bit of an int, I'm not gonna lie. I inted my face. So, and now they get the dragon, which is super late, because now this is terrible for them, because they're putting themselves in a situation. They're gonna get outscaled. That's a granted. Like Rise and Ziggs, massive scaling champions. Now, the Renekton isn't behind, which, as we previously said, the Renekton needs to be behind if this is going to work, because they don't really have any other AD, and Lee Sin isn't reliable enough AD, especially considering in a team fight, Lee Sin can't really auto-attack. He's just looking for like insects and kind of plays and picks. He's not really going to be autoing, so he's not reliable AD damage, and even though Renekton isn't really like a reliable AD threat, he's still their only potential AD threat. Now the problem is now that Xin Zhao is now getting the dragon at 9 minutes, which means instead of getting the dragon previously through a numbers advantage, now he's in a situation where he's choosing between either a dragon or a herald. Now the reason why this is so bad for RNG, and this could potentially lose in the game actually, is because Renekton's got a lot of pressure top lane. Lee Sin can just walk up, herald it, and get the tower easy. It's over, it's like 1,000 gold for free, and in return, the Xin Zhao is getting one dragon. Now this isn't great as well because it's 9 minutes, which means we're looking maybe 20, like maybe 30 minutes before Soul, considering everything that's going to happen on the map. So we're going to be waiting until 30 minutes for Soul anyway. And if we're in a 30-minute game against a Ryze and a Ziggs, we've really messed up. We've really inted that game, because if you're at a 30-minute game and it's stagnant against a Ryze and a Ziggs, you're just never going to be able to clear a wave ever again. You're just going to get forced in until slowly they're going to get a pick and then siege, and that's just how this team comp is going to go. So by prioritizing Dragon, which does give nice stats, don't get me wrong, it's an Infernal which does give you damage, I'd much prefer to prioritize a Herald that gives you 1,000 gold, which you can use to then snowball the rest of the game, which Lee Sin gets here, and you know, he's going to get both of the crabs. Now, the reason he's doing this and getting both of them at the same time is because as soon as he takes his Herald, there's a global notification that he's got it. So if he then starts taking the Scuttle, there's an opportunity for the Syndra to roam up, maybe the Xin Zhao and the Braum goes. So this is actually a very smart play that he does in order to get as much as possible out of this play. This also means that Xiao Hu doesn't get the opportunity to react to this Herald being taken when the global announcement is made, which means now they can just dive in and get that tower, which again, like we previously said, is 1,000 gold. Like, so it's ridiculous. It's over 1,000 gold. Sorry, I think it's more like 1,200. But so see, they dive him. Now they get the tower down to 2 plates. They herald it. They get the tower. They've just got 1,200 gold. This game is looking very, very bad for RNG now. Like, very bad. So we can see in this top lane, Herald's dropped. Ezreal's getting pressure bot lane. Obviously, there's not much to get it for, so I think he's just going to look to get a reset off. He is up on farm, but again, he's against the Ziggs, so the Ziggs is going to do a lot more. Unfortunately, they dropped the Herald very, very early. Or did they not use it? No, he didn't use the Herald. So Lee Sin decided against using Herald here. So what this says to me is that they want to keep this Mundo in the laning phase so that they can dive him again. So what's going to happen here is Lee Sin's probably going to just go and clear out all his camps while Renekton resets, and then he's going to reset, spend his gold, just come straight back top, dive the Mundo again, or just kill him in the lane since the wave is kind of reset here. If anything, the wave is pushing into Renekton here, so now Lee Sin might not even reset. The amount of base damage that Lee Sin has in his Q, on top of the fact that he's got his Iron Spike Whip kind of spike, means that he could just potentially regank. No, he's going to reset. He's got a lot of gold, so he's not going to play it too risky. He picks up the Boots and Gore Drinker, so now Lee Sin's on a massive spike, and he's up by about 300 gold against his Xin Zhao that also needs to get early gold. So the kind of jungle matchup is going very well right now. The top matchup is 1,000 gold up because they've actually focused him, and because they kind of picked Mundo into it, which isn't great because now Xin can't play the 2v2 top lane because it's a Mundo. So they just completely griefed themselves in draft here, like, which is quite sad to see. So now we see that Ale is just holding this wave back, and now this wave is in a perfect position that Lee Sin can come whenever he wants. Ale can probably just jump on him and kill him without the Lee Sin, to be honest, but I think it's more beneficial to wait. But they're going to rise ult onto the Ezreal. This is very scrappy, but it works out pretty well. Tarzan does not die. He manages to get out before that tower shot. And now I think he'll probably he's going to look to herald this with the Ziggs now. Because if he drops his herald now, it's going to take 2 plates. And then a little bit more damage and Ziggs can just one-shot the tower. So maybe that's what Tarzan's looking to do here. I don't know why he's not looking to use his herald. Like, especially considering it is ticking down. And he's had kind of 2 opportunities to create a play where the herald can be very, very useful. So maybe he's looking to wait and try something else. But we'll see how he plays it out. Now, one of the biggest problems with holding Herald on Lee Sin for this long, and why I think it's really bad, is because you need those wards to be able to ward hop, and he can't afford the control wards because he went for his Gold Drinker straight up, which is definitely the correct play. But so now we see the Herald being used, and maybe he was waiting for the Rise to be able to make a rotation bot lane, but now we see the Herald's going to pop the tower for 2 plates, and now Ziggs is just going to throw his W down. Wait, he missed his W. What? The Ziggs just completely griefed this fight. Like, he threw his W down to try and displace the, I think it was the Ezreal, instead of just using it on the tower. So this is really bad. Tarzan dies for this now, and now they get to clean up. So this was actually a really, really bad thing from Ziggs, to be honest. Like, this was a mix of Ziggs playing it wrong and the team not communicating properly what they wanted to do, because they should have communicated that perfectly to get the Herald charge into the Ziggs execution on the tower instantly. So that's a really, really bad bad move by Light, and that really, really cost him. Okay, so he tried to ult the Braum, but obviously Braum's E just blocks the first ability entirely and then reduces the rest of the damage from subsequent abilities after that. So as soon as the Ziggs ult marker got placed on the floor, all he had to do was instantly E and pop off. Is Tarzan as good as they say? Yes, Tarzan is solo carrying horrendous drafts and just having so much pressure in the early game. He's insanely powerful. Like, he's so good, but his team are just, they're just not up to his standard. Like, Tarzan on Griffin was completely different because he had an entire roster of ridiculously talented players. But on this roster, Ale is a very big weak point. The drafting is terrible. They prioritize Renekton way too much, and it just completely greases them the game. And overall, you know, their early game is great, but they often fall behind too. So it's very shaky. Now, it does seem like they know what to do when it comes to like the mid to late game, but it's getting to that point a lot of the times. So Cryan actually gets picked off by Tarzan. Nice jump backwards. So there's double TPs coming in. Rise ult to get behind them. Ale just instantly gets one shot though. And now RNG can just easily win this fight by playing it slow. Purely for the fact that Ale is just really, really griefed this. Wandy uses his stopwatch. But this is fine. They just need to kite backwards. Use the Xin ult to block as much as they can. And now just keep poking out with the Ezreal. Syndra manages to get a nice pick. And they can keep continuing this fight. Due to the fact that LNG have used so many of their cooldowns in order to get what they did, and it actually ended up turning into a 2-for-2, even though Braum died very, very early. So honestly, that weren't too bad. I think RNG could have played that team fight a lot better by playing it much slower, but overall it was a pretty solid team fight for both teams, and it just ended up in a 2-for-2. Now obviously LNG is already in the lead, so this is much worse for them actually, because they have a gold advantage and they've still lost a 5v5 or gone even in a 5v5. So with a gold advantage at this stage of the game, if you're not winning those 5v5s, then things become a little bit shaky, especially they don't need to worry. So we've got the replay of it. We see really nice bait from the Tarzan to try and get rid of the Syndra E. And then, I mean, Ale just gets insta-popped. He does manage to Gold Drinker Q. No, he doesn't manage to get his Q off, sorry, only Gold Drinker. The Lee Sin does try and finish it off. Massive Gold Drinker. It's got so much value in this game because it's so short range. And you know, now the Ezreal just needs to keep poking out slowly, and they just win the fight. The Xin Zhao just jumps directly on Tarzan. I don't think that was worth, considering they could have just won the fight if they just played it way slower. Ezreal has his Syndra. He was just waiting for the ability to keep outputting damage from a safe range. So now at this point we're 16 minutes into the game. There's about 1,000 gold lead in regards to LNG, and they're gonna get the second herald. I mean, Tarzan doesn't have anything else to do on the map, so the second herald isn't bad. But at the same time, like, it's better if they're just getting prio. Rise is moving now, but this mid wave is at an even point, and there's no reason that he should be moving to this objective until his wave is cleared, especially considering he's playing Rise and he's got so much mana in his items right now, and he'd recently reset too. So that's a really, really big issue with Icon, and I feel like this happens a lot in China, where they're willing to just completely int their lane state in order to try and get an advantage in a team fight, which just doesn't really work against better teams, in my opinion. Well, not better teams, but like teams that don't play that same style, it doesn't really work as much. When teams all play that same style, it's not as bad, because it's a case of who can then team fight better. But they dropped the Herald here. They're going to get tier 1 mid. This is why, you know, Herald... I mean, tier 1 mid is okay to get. It does mean that Ezreal is... it's going to be very risky, but one of the big things with Ezreal is if you get on top of him once and you have follow-up, it's very hard for him to do anything. And this Trundle can very easily get on top of him with his W and E alone. So he's going to have Trundle racing him down, and Lee Sin and Renekton, so plenty of jumps. So Tarzan just kind of ints that very, very hard. Nice ult from Xin Zhao to stop him getting to his team. So Ale is completely isolated right now, and Xin Zhao's just going to go crazy. This is very, very good play by Wei. I mean, I think they could have potentially kept chasing that down, but they don't have Ezreal available, so it's not too worth it. Ezreal does need to start using his Qs on the wave now, so that he can get his ult on a lower cooldown though, and now we can potentially just kill Light if he ults. So Xin Zhao is also coming around the back. Light's completely griefed here. There's no reason you should be staying for a tier 1 tower like that, but oh my god, okay, so Ezreal completely griefed his ultimate as well. Like, all you have to do is wait for the Xin to jump on top of him, wait for the W to come through from the Ziggs, and then just ult after, and it's completely fine. So that was a complete grief by the Ezreal, and it just actually lost them. Like, a massive kill. Yeah, everybody's griefing. Like, there's so much going on in this fight. So we get the replay of it now. So Tarzan actually manages to get a good insec on the Syndra, but he does get zoned out and exhausted. Syndra does go down, but Xin manages to get so much space with that ultimate, which was just really, really good. And due to the fact that they can't really hit him because they're ranged, he can now just jump on them with full HP very, very easily. Ale gets one shot by the chickens pretty much. And then unfortunately they didn't show the complete grief Ezreal ult, but he's just finished his mana moon now, so Ezreal is now in a position where he's going to be outputting a significant amount more damage in these team fights, and I think that's going to be enough to kind of offset into RNG's favour, especially considering they also have that Mountain Drake, so they have an extra 6%. Oh my god, my eyes though, like, okay, so the play is one thing, but why the fuck does Syndra have an Oblivion Orb? Like, what is going on? Like, she's the only AP on the team. Like, she's the sole responsibility for doing ability damage in this game, like, and she's gone for an Oblivion Orb. Like, what? It makes no sense. It's crazy. Like, take it on the Ezreal. I mean, Ezreal is also snowballing, so I mean, take it on the Xin. Like, just not the Syndra, for the love of God. So I mean, pretty clean fight all round. They just insta pop the Renekton. Again, we're seeing, I mean, this has been a worrying trend that Renekton, again, is a completely useless pick. So, like, they need to stop drafting Renekton early. LNG can do so well at Worlds, I think, if they just stop with this fucking drafting. Like, it's so depressing to see, because Tarzan is playing out of his mind every single game. Like, every game. And Icon, if he gets put on a good champion, he just completely pops off as well. But they can't really do much, because no matter what they put Ale on, unless they give him the counter pick, he just griefs the game and completely ints. So, I mean, they even tried shifting Renekton onto Icon in the mid lane as well, but Renekton mid just isn't as great, and playing into Syndra is an impossible matchup, so yep. I mean, they're looking for this kind of all-in kind of champion that's kind of beefy, but you can do that with so many other top laners. Like just pick Ornn instead. If you're gonna kind of commit to these late game comps with something like a Rise and a Ziggs, take something like an Ornn instead. They get ornaments later on into the game. It's 1,000 gold per ornament, just for free, pretty much. So as soon as Ornn gets to that late game point, he's fine. So in laning phase, he doesn't even have to do anything. I'd even accept something like a Maokai, like. just because, you know, like, it doesn't matter how much CS you lose and how much they pressure you on a tank, like, you're always going to be viable in that game to some degree, because you're a tank and you're just building pure resistances, especially against teams like this where, you know, the Syndra's not ahead and she's going with an Oblivion Orb anyway, so you can just stack armor and you'll be a super tank in this game. Even something like the Scion, I'd love to see the Scion here instead. Like, and the Scion plays very well towards what these like Chinese teams are trying to achieve, because he has the ability to rotate into another lane or into a fight and then still get kind of back into his lane, and he can do that twice, because when he's got 6 he can use his ult to get there and then he can use his TP as well. So I don't know, I think I don't know, I like this Renekton, like, I'm glad he got such a substantial nerf this patch, because I'm sick of seeing this champion from China. Like, it's so grief. So, I mean, the Ziggs is very, very strong right now, and he's been left unchecked for the majority of the game, but I mean, to be honest, in this situation, I'd still prefer the Grievous Wounds on the Rise instead of the Ziggs. Now, I think isolated, and if they didn't have a Rise mid, then great, but Rise or it, he's got his Everfrost, he's 0-2 and 6, he's playing a little bit more of a supportive role, he's going to rely on the Ziggs to do more ability power at this point of the game, so you just allow the Ziggs to itemize into more damage. Like, honestly, I wouldn't even mind seeing Ziggs just itemize into, like, a Rabadon's here. Like, just while it's early into the game and he can farm safely and just kind of get to those two big, needlessly large rods. One thing I don't see often, though, is there's a severe lack of Ziggs players that enjoy going Seraphs. Now, I don't know if there's like some interaction with Ziggs and Seraph that I'm overlooking, but I feel like Seraph's Embrace on Ziggs is just so useful because you get so much kind of mana in the laning phase with your Lost Chapter and that tier that you just end up spamming like bombs and you just have a much easier laning phase. So I don't know why nobody ever favors it, especially considering it gives such a large amount of damage later on, especially because Ezreal is also going tier 2, so you're not even going to lose out on damage. Now, in some situations, if say for example you're playing into, let's say, a Lucian bot lane, like, or let's say even like a Varus that, you know, can get his Dustblade and do a lot of damage. Like, actually Varus goes Manamoon too, so that's a bad example. So let's say for example you're playing into any kind of AD bot that doesn't really go tier. Let's say you're playing into an Ashe bot lane. You can't really afford to go into a tier into an Ashe lane because Ashe has the ability to get just massive amounts of power off every single item she buys. But when you're playing into a laner that also goes for a tier and suffers that kind of damage drop by building that tier, I actually think it's completely fine. He did go into a Horizon Focus though, which I do also really like, especially considering that's going to allow his ultimate to do a considerable amount more damage. I do think the Rabadons would have been better, but it's also a lot more expensive. But I also feel like it wasn't as great going Horizon Focus here because he didn't get the opportunity to abuse the Alternator Spike at all because he just went straight into the item. So a little bit rough. Ezreal going into a Hex Drinker. Now he's got his 2 core items, completely fine, especially considering most of their damage is going to be coming from those AP sources, so going with that is completely fine. I also wouldn't have minded if he would have gone something like a Spirit Visage as well, to be honest. I think once Ezreal has his 2 main items, if he doesn't need Armor Pen, then that's fine. So Lee Sin with another amazing ultimate. Holy, this is just insane. What the hell? He does manage to get out. Actually, he'll manage to W over the wall here. Okay, so he doesn't manage to get it off in time, but Ale actually does something as a follow-up engage, and that's fine. Like, if you wanted to, if you wanted to see an example of how good Tarzan is, this is definitely the game for it. This guy, this game is playing out of his mind. Like, he's had 2 really important insects at very important times, because if he didn't manage to make that play work there, then RNG would have got the Ocean Soul, and there's not really that much they can do into that. Then Ocean Soul on things like the Ezreal and the Syndra means that Syndra actually has the ability to clear waves at an acceptable standard because she has so much more mana from that Ocean Soul. But now, I don't think LNG are going to get the opportunity to go for a soul in this game, but that insect was amazing. Managed to instantly get the Syndra out, which again, now their main AP damage is gone. So now their armor is even more valuable. Now he survives for a considerable amount of time here, and then Ale actually just goes nuts. So, you know, it doesn't matter how useless Renekton is if the entire team are on like 2 HP. So amazing ult from the from Tarzan, and that completely changed the game. Because at this point, if say for example, like it's not going to happen, but say this game went to 3 more dragons right now, so another 15 minutes, LNG are actually going to get that Ocean Soul due to the fact that they have such a hard scaling comp now that there's not really that much that the side of RNG can do to stop them with that scaling. And this happened with the EDG game yesterday, where EDG was second against WE, who I think were 7th, and you know, like WE completely ruined them. Like they won early game over and over and over, and we're kind of seeing a similar thing here, where RNG were 4th in the regular split, and they're against an 8th place team, but this 8th place team are actually playing significantly better, and it's all coming from Tarzan, to be honest. Like this guy best be getting paid a ridiculous amount of money. Like a ridiculous amount. If this guy isn't on bank, then I feel very sorry for him, because he has been playing out of his mind. Like every single game. Like even like his early game like invasions and kind of the way he calls his support to move about has been really, really impressive. So now we can see that he's just looking to get a kick. He does have a control ward. I would like to see him having 2 control wards in his inventory at once. So that way he can use 1 to ward hop and 1 for an objective. But that's okay for now. He does have a ward in his trinket too, so he can also use that for an insect also. His flash is coming up in about a minute or so's time. So about, you know, a minute and a half, and his flash will be back up, which again will mean that he can just single out this Syndra again. And as we can see in their comp, we've got armor, we've got armor in here. Now I do want to see them like take more now. I would like to see this Rise maybe get a Seekers after he's finished this Void Staff. I would like to see, oh okay, Renekton's actually got his GA now. So now all of this armor becomes so valuable because the Syndra is always going to get caught out by the fact that Tarzan is so good on Lee Sin. So I actually think at this stage of the game, it's very difficult for RNG to come back because their AD damage dealers aren't doing enough AD. And we can see here, the Xin Zhao has decided to go with a Black Cleaver. There's no way they have 86 armor yet, like especially the priority targets he wants to go for. And, you know, like the item doesn't really benefit him anywhere near as much as something like a Sterax. Like the fact that he repeatedly puts value on Black Cleaver over Sterax is crazy to me. Like it just doesn't really make much sense. It's crazy bad, crazy bad. So this game is now at 30 minutes. We're gonna look to skip to the juicy parts a bit more, just because honestly I wouldn't be surprised if LNG just play to just pull this game out as long as possible, since this is the last game they need to beat RNG, who are, you know, one of the most longest standing Chinese organizations, holding some of the greats. Like Uzi is still one of the greats by far. That guy is the most talented player that's never won anything, or never won Worlds, should I say. So again, like there's not really much that RNG can do here, and as you can see, they've got to send 4 people into mid lane just to kind of keep up with the wave clear that just Rise and Zigzag on their own. So they do actually have a control ward in the back of this pit, so Xin Zhao cannot start this, and this is a repeat of game 1, where Xin Zhao just called for a Baron and it just complete grief. So I like that RNG are deciding not to go with this Baron call now, even though it was pinged by the Xin Zhao, I think. Okay, Xin Zhao missed his W. Like, Wei is a really big weak factor here. Like, in these games. So now Rise ult to get them into a more favorable position around this Baron. If they could get a pick, they're great, but they're just doing it for the kind of repositional value that it gives and just to see if they can kind of snag someone off. So the dragon is actually available for them to take. So I'd actually, if I was LNG, I'd prefer to stay towards its bottom side right now and look to pressure the dragon, since they can't rush Baron with the comp that they have faster than LNG can take dragon and then get up to the fight. So LNG are in a much more controlled situation now. I'd like to see Tarzan just jump on the dragon and try it, but this TP is very grief. Like, this TP from Ale is completely pointless. They could have done this without him, and instead he could have come into bot lane, pushed bot lane waves out until this point of the map. As soon as somebody shows here, then he just TPs to Baron with a minion advantage, and they just get the Baron very free. So using his TP to get to a ward for a dragon that they were already going to get is completely grief. Like, even at this stage in the game, when his team is so hard winning, Ale is still trying to find ways that he can run the game down. Like, instead of just playing fundamentally correct and just basically playing the scaling game. Like, I don't know. I think if LNG had a top like Naguri, like, they would probably be one of the strongest teams. Actually, their bot is a little bit weak, but, like, Tarzan needs a laner to play around. Icon can perform, and he will perform, but I don't feel like he's an overall carry unless he's on an assassin. Although, to be fair, he's huge this game, and his build is looking pretty good too. He's got that stopwatch in his inventory. Double control ward too, which is nice to see. I do want to see more control wards out of Lee Sin. Okay, there we go. 2 more out of him. So, you know, this is looking pretty good. So LNG playing a very composed game, repeatedly getting priority in mid lane before moving about. Xin Zhao has only just built some MR, which is interesting. This Mundo is what? What? Why would you go Thornmail? They've got a Rise and a Ziggs. What the fuck is he doing? Like, then we have this is his grief. Like, oh god, like, yeah, this is over. LNG win this game. Like, 100%. Like, the opportunities for RNG to come back into the game now are just completely out of the question. Like, they're stacking armor against a double AP threat. Like, it just doesn't really make sense. Although, oh, amazing. I love to see this though. The Trundle has actually picked up a Wardstone, which is amazing because Wardstone is incredibly valuable. It gives you so many free stats. I'm not sure if this was pre-buff or not, but it also gives you so much haste, which means, you know, more pillars, more Ws, more Qs. Very good for Trundle. I actually want to see LNG just potentially look to rush a Baron here, though, to be honest, due to the fact that Baron has less magic resist than armor. So it means if you do have this double AP threat, you can completely melt the Baron very, very quick. And this is obviously to offset the fact that if you're playing an ADC, depending on the ADC, obviously, if you're playing a generic ADC, then you have more tower pushing potential, but not quite as much Baron potential, depending on mana, obviously. Yeah, I don't know. This is a little bit rough. Okay. Right, so now again, like I said, LNG can literally just wait out dragons. Like, and that's what they're going to do. So I mean, it's very good play by them. It's very controlled. They're just going to wait out these dragons now, and they're just going to get Ocean Soul. Like, there's no way that RNG can, like, force... Oh, this was a really nice Rise ult, though. That saved him very, very heavily, and they got the Ezreal's TP as well. The Ezreal's TP doesn't really mean as much as, say, the Syndra or the Mundo, but it's still very, very valuable that they've got it because they've just got one less now. Ezreal is going to be permanently grouped with the team, though, so TP at this level, at this stage of the game really doesn't matter much, but overall... So LNG looking for a pick, so a lovely pick from the Lee Sin on the Ezreal. He is going to potentially get away and do a lot of damage. Oh, never mind. That Syndra E was beautiful. Tarzan does actually survive though. He does have GA too, and Ale is in the middle. He does manage to get his empowered Q off and his Gold Drinker, I think, but he does have his GA taken away. Now the Rise is actually just going to do a shit ton of damage in this little kind of area, and they're just going to completely annihilate this wave and get the tower. So what I want to see from them here is focus the tower and then potentially stop the recalls, but they didn't manage to do that. So now they get this tower. Okay, good. Now they move into getting, again, this dragon. Once again. So now they're one dragon away from Ocean Soul, which there's been 6 dragons in this game so far, which is kind of crazy. But RNG are actually taking this opportunity while they know that the Lee Sin does dragons due to the global thing to try and do Baron. But I don't think they do it in time. Do they? Actually, they might. Yeah, they do, actually. Okay, so they managed to get it in time, but now they're in a very, very bad position and in a very good position for Tarzan to fight. So he actually managed to... Okay, so the Syndra E again was so powerful, so that's the main thing that's going to stop them. He does manage to just instantly one-shot the Xin Zhao though, but that isn't really the target, so it's not really a good play. RNG actually managed to pull this team fight back a little bit, especially considering Syndra was alive, but now the Rise is just going to ult in and kill them both. So, I mean... Oh, wait, never mind. Gala played it insane. So the amount of healing that Gala's got out of their red buff is unbelievable. He managed to actually win that fight. Gala is huge. He's worth 1,000 gold as well. That actually just stalled this game really, really hard, because that would have been the game. Now, I mean, it's a 40-minute game. Like, holy. We're going to watch the replay about what happened again, because... So they do start this. Obviously, so this isn't too bad, right? Because even this Baron, as long as they can't siege with it, which Rise, even though it does a massive amount of kind of reduced magic, it gives the minions reduced magic damage. It doesn't really matter as much because Rise still does so much that he can instantly clear the waves out. Now we end up in a kind of situation now where because they've been doing Baron, they've got a debuff on them which reduces their armor and magic resist, which means LNG actually managed to get a massive amount. But what we actually see is mid-fight, obviously the debuff expires, and they actually managed to get a massive amount. That was a really good Syndra E into the Ezreal ult. Tarzan did manage to get this Insect off, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a priority target, and this really screwed them over. So even though Tarzan's playing this game very well, you can see the pressure is really getting to him at this point now, because he jumped in on the Xin and used his ult on the Xin instead of the Ezreal, which if he would have ulted Ezreal instead, it would have been completely fine. Now, the Ezreal just managed to get a massive amount. Again, they managed to proc that Braum passive extremely fast because of the Ezreal autos and Qs proccing it. So they actually managed to completely lock up the Rise and stop him from completely annihilating the Ezreal. As you can see there, 8k damage in that team fight. Ziggs also did 8.3k, but it's not really the same since Ezreal's damage is... Besides his ult, mostly single target, and Ziggs' ultimate does a lot more overall damage, especially if you throw it down in an area that they need to stay, like in a position where they're doing Dragon. Oh, Baron, sorry. That was an insane amount of damage though, just out of that Ezreal ult, and it's fine for Ezreal to keep using his ult in this way, due to the fact that his Qs actually reduce the cooldown of all of his abilities, and this actually includes his ultimate. So, at this stage of the game, when Ezreal is full build, he can use his ultimate for poke, especially against somebody like Ziggs, who does have that Rabadon's and Horizon focus, but he's not really going to have anywhere near as much healing as somebody like the Ezreal. So this actually coming to a close sometime soon, especially considering this dragon is spawning in 2 minutes. They have to fight over this. RNG's getting a really good siege with this Baron off, but I really don't think the siege is strong enough. Getting a tier 2 tower with a Baron buff when you're against a team that is infinitely better scaling than you is really, really rough. Now, Ezreal does output a lot of damage in the late game, don't get me wrong, but he's not going to output anywhere near as much as things like the Ziggs. Now, he has also picked up a Bloodthirster now too, so he will be healing by quite a lot. They're trying to siege this tier 2 in bot. Again, it's 600 gold, but at this point of the game, it really doesn't matter that much. The Ziggs ult behind them to stop them walking back. It was a little bit too soon, so the tower didn't actually focus anybody. Like, his thought process was good, but the execution was bad. Now RNG, though, are in a position where they can potentially look to just go on this dragon as soon as it spawns. So LNG really, really need to look for ways to get prio now and push this out. Now, we do see a lot of magic resistance coming in now. We've got the Spirit Visage and the Gargoyles on the Mundo, combined with his ultimate. We have a Wit's End on Xin Zhao. I personally think Wit's End on Xin Zhao is actually pretty good, considering how much MR it gives, and considering it still gives you damage and ability to kind of fight, and that attack speed boost is nice. The on-hit doesn't really matter because you're not looking to put out as much autos as you would earlier into the game. But if they can potentially defend this Ezreal now, then maybe RNG do have a chance to win. I highly doubt it, but potentially. I think the comp LNG has is just way too beneficial at this stage of the game now. There's going to be a really big fight over this dragon right now. They need to make sure that they're keeping this priority in mid lane. Ale needs to stop griefing. He's going for a flank when, you know, like, he doesn't need to go for it just yet. He could have pushed that wave out and got, you know, pressure in bot lane and denied them that wave entirely. But he is sat in the brush. He's going to get instantly killed, though. Like, okay, never mind. He actually managed to survive, luckily, and they did waste quite a lot on him. But Zhao Hu's just tanking up the entire team. RNG at the back. Cryan's almost dead, though, and Tarzan's just completely focusing the dragon. Icon's very, very low, and he's very susceptible to Ezreal just killing him off. And Ale's going. They're going to reset off the dragon just so that they don't die to Gala, because this guy's going nuts. Like, and they managed to get the Ocean Soul. So potentially, RNG have the ability to win the game now, due to the fact that that Ocean Soul would have been the nail in the coffin for RNG from if LNG would have got it. So, okay, so pick. Okay, so Tarzan sat in a brush. I mean, it wasn't warded. He knew that. He manages to do a ton of damage to Gala, but it just doesn't matter. His healing is unreal. Lee Sin doesn't have any anti-heal on him, rightly so, but it means that he can't really go for this Ezreal and go for these fights. It's just completely grief. So he is looking for another pick. He needs to get this Syndra off the map. If he does, then that armor becomes a lot more valuable. So, okay, so they managed to actually catch the Syndra. Okay, so Renekton gets out. If he actually lives here, then this is good for LNG. They can actually start a siege now. They should just reset and then look to try and pressure Baron. If they do manage to do this, then I think it can be okay. So again, like we said with the AP champions, look at how fast they're going to take this Baron. It's just getting completely melted because, again, it has less magic resist and armor. So these kind of double AP are doing really well. This is where kind of things like Corki come in well too, and Azir, because later on into the game, okay, so we have an amazing Rise ult here to catch Gala as he's trying to put, as he's trying to push this wave out. And this is game. LNG have just won this with a beautiful Rise ult from Icon. Like, Icon has been playing a little bit more of a supportive Rise kind of game. Like, he's got a lot of assists and not many kills, but it's completely fine. He's a wave clear bot, and at this point of the game, they're just going to run them down. Like, they have Baron, and they managed to get a really good Rise ult. So this, you see the amount of value that Rise can provide, but for me, Tarzan, this game just completely held them in it. Like, the picks that he managed to get were insane, and LNG actually win it to go 3-1 against RNG. That's kind of crazy. Like, I feel like if LNG just control Ale and stop him griefing the game, they can actually have a really good run at Worlds. The problem is, Ale and Awandi just grief all the time. Like, all the time. And they just end up completely running the game down. So, pretty good game, though. Let's have a look. Let's fill out the spreadsheet. So, let's fill out the spreadsheet before we end up calling it a day. So RNG had so RNG also favored blue side, and LNG also favored red side 5 games in a row this game. Like, it's kind of crazy. And then who did LNG have? So they went with the Renekton, Lee Sin, Rise, Ziggs, and Trundle. So, to be honest, the Mundo, I mean, the pick was complete grief. Like, I don't know why they put it, but he didn't play it well either. The Xin Zhao didn't really do that much either. I'll put him at yellow. He didn't grief, but he didn't really do that much. Syndra did actually, I'll put her as yellow. I mean, she didn't play great, but she did get some really, really good ease off to cancel. Ezreal was just insane this game. I'm gonna give him blue. I'm gonna give him MVP even though they lost, because he played out of his mind, like out of his mind. It was insane. Gala is very, very talented. I'll give Braum. I'll give Braum green. I mean, he did play okay. In terms of this, Renekton, I think this pick, even though they won, was completely fucking useless. I'll go with orange because there was a few kind of follow-up engages that were nice. I'm just gonna give an MVP to Tarzan as well. He was just insane. I think Rise played great, Ziggs played great, but overall, I'll put these both on green. And then in terms of support, I mean, I think Trundle played okay. I'll put him on yellow. There were a few kind of imp plays. Actually, no, I'll just give him. He did play pretty well. So, I mean, overall, we've continuously confirmed that Renekton is complete garbage. What I'm going to do now is we'll call it a day there, because I'm actually going to go out for a bit. Imagine I'm going outside. Yeah, guys, like, don't mind me. I am an IRL enjoyer. So, who have we got streaming? Come on. So LEC is streaming. I don't know what they're streaming. What are LEC streaming? Okay, so LEC. So oh, it's E-Masters. Semi-finals. Okay. So we're gonna raid Espen, because we're gonna shoot off now. Oh, because we're gonna go off now and go out. So again, we'll be here same time tomorrow, for some more games. Hopefully you enjoy Espen's stream, and I'll see you all tomorrow. I'll upload all of these to YouTube later tonight. Right, in a bit. Bye bye.